system and correcting your status in the system.
Midwest EDU focuses on educating individuals about practical steps like managing debt, building savings and investing strategically. Key principles include financial tools like trust, bonds, and legal instruments to protect and grow assets, correcting your status in the system. This involves reclaiming your legal and financial identity within governmental and financial systems. Understanding your legal status, correct legal documents
Like birth certificates and social security records
to align with your preferred status. Steps begin. Educate yourself. Attend workshops, read relevant materials, and network with like-minded individuals. Assess your current standing, understand your debt, credit status, and legal documentation. Take action, start correcting your status through affidavits, trust formations, or A9 applications while building a financial foundation. Plan for long-term freedom. Focus on investments, business, ventures, and creating generational wealth. Midwest EDU's approach empowers individuals to break free from financial and legal constraints, ensuring they live a life aligned with their goals and values. Financial tools like trust, bonds, and legal instruments to protect and grow assets, correcting your status in the system. This involves reclaiming your legal and financial identity within governmental and financial systems. Understanding your legal status, correcting legal documents
like birth certificates and social security records
to align with your preferred status. Steps to begin. Educate yourself. Attend workshops, read relevant materials, and network with like-minded individuals. Assess your current standing, understand your debt, credit status, and legal documentation. Take action, start correcting your status through affidavits, trust formations, or A9.
In his chair, eyeing them warily. Heard about you, Trays. What makes you think I need your help? Hammett, always the enforcer, leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. You might not need it now, but things change. We keep your business running smooth. No trouble, no interruption. All we ask is a small cut. Adewale hesitated, but eventually nodded. This ain't just about corners and stores. We need businesses that bring in money without drawing heat. Vic chimed in. What about trucking? I know a dude who runs a fleet out west. We could tap in. Do it, Demeter said, and find out what we need to start our own fleet. We keep everything in house. 2. Navigating new some crews were willing to negotiate, others weren't so cooperative. The Brick Boys last stand the Brick Boys, who had clashed with the Trays before, tried to block their expansion into 65th. Their leader, a loudmouth named Rico, issued an ultimatum, stay off his block or face the consequences. Demeter didn't flinch. We ain't backing down, he said. But we ain't walking into a trap either. Hammett, Ty, y'all handle it. Hammett and Ty arranged a meeting with Rico at a neutral spot, a rundown park near the edge of Tray territory. The tension was thick as the two sides faced off, each crew sizing up the other. You think you can just roll in here and take what's mine? Rico spat. We ain't taking shit, Hammett replied, his voice cold. We're offering you a way to keep your block and make money at the same time. Rico laughed. Yeah? And what's stopping me from just taking you out right now? Ty, silent until now, stepped forward, his calm demeanor hiding the storm. Beneath. Because you know you can't win. You try us, and this block won't have a Brick Boy left standing. The standoff ended without bloodshed, but Rico's days were numbered. A week later, he was arrested on a gun charge, and the Brick Boys crumbled. The Trays absorbed their territory with minimal resistance. Building alliances, not every crew was an enemy. Demeter used diplomacy to forge alliances with smaller crews on the outskirts of Tray territory, offering them protection and a share of profits in exchange for loyalty. One such crew, the Grove Street Hustlers, became a valuable ally. Their leader, Kayla K. Jones, was sharp and resourceful, bringing a fresh perspective to the table. You're different from the other crews, Kay told Demeter during their first meeting. You think long term. I like that. And I like people who know how to play the game, Demeter replied. Welcome to the team. 3. Balancing expansion and risk. As the Trey's empire grew, so did the risks. Law enforcement wasn't the only concern. Internal tensions and external enemies threatened to destabilize their progress. Hammett's burden. Hammett found himself taking on more responsibilities as the crew expanded. He was the one who handled disputes, enforced discipline, and ensured everyone stayed in line. But the constant pressure was starting to weigh on him. One night, after a particularly heated confrontation with a rogue soldier, Hammett sat with Demeter in the barbershop, his frustration evident. We keep growing, D, but it feels like we're stretching too thin, Hammett said. One wrong move, and this whole thing could fall apart. Demeter nodded. That's why we stay sharp. We don't let the pressure get to us. You're my right hand, Hammett. I trust you to keep shit together. Unexpected betrayal. The expansion wasn't without its setbacks. One of their new recruits, a former brick boy named Lil J, was caught skimming from collections. When Hammett confronted him, Lil J tried to run, but Hammett and Ty caught him in an alley. You really thought you could steal from us and get away with it? Hammett growled, his fist connecting with Lil J's jaw. I'm sorry, man. I needed it for my family. Lil J pleaded, blood dripping from his mouth. Hammett paused, his anger tempered by the desperation in the young man's eyes. This ain't personal, Jay. But you knew the rules. Demeter decided to let Lil J go, but he was banished from Trey territory, a reminder to everyone of the consequences of betrayal. 4. The crown, the end of the Yishans. They were no longer just a South Side crew, they were a force to be reckoned with across the city. But with power came new challenges. Community tension. Some residents appreciated the stability the Treys brought, but others resented their presence. Protests against gang violence began cropping up, led by local activists who saw the Treys as part of the problem. We gotta start thinking about our image, Vic said during a meeting. People respect us now, but if we lose the community, we lose everything. Demeter nodded. We'll deal with it. But for now, we focus on keeping what we got. The syndicate's demands. Tez and the Southside Syndicate, emboldened by the larger cut of the profits from joint ventures. Demeter, unwilling to be strong-armed, pushed back. This ain't a charity, Demeter told Tez during a tense meeting. You get what we agreed on. Nothing more. Tez smirked. Careful. D. Alliances don't last forever. Chapter 11, All or Nothing, Part 1, Fallout with the Syndicate. The Syndicate's ultimatum. The air inside the abandoned, faint smell of oil and rust, but from the tension thick enough to cut with a blade. Demeter leaned back in a rickety chair, his eyes locked on Tez Holloway, the leader of the Southside Syndicate. Tez sat across from him, flanked by his enforcers, Mace and Silk. Behind Demeter stood Hammett, Ty, and Vic, their presence radiating quiet intimidation. Tez's smirk was as sharp as a blade. Let's not waste time, D. The streets are talking. You're making moves, and we respect that. But you ain't doing it alone no more. You got us to thank for some of that success. Demeter cocked his head, his expression unreadable. Success? What success? I'm still out here cleaning up messes, most of them left by your boys. Tez's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing. Watch your tone. I'm saying this as a friend. Things change. We're taking bigger risks, and it's time our cut reflects that. 20%. Hammett took a half step forward. His fists clenched. You out of your damn mind. Tez raised a hand, signaling Mace and Silk to stay put. I get it, Ham. You're loyal. But loyalty don't pay the bills. 20% or this partnership goes up in flames. Demeter finally leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His voice was calm, but there was steel behind it. Let me explain something, Tez. Partnerships don't work when one side starts thinking they're owed more than they earned. We're doing the work. We're taking the heat. And you're lucky to get what you're getting. Deals can change, D. And so can alliances, Demeter shot back. The room went silent, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Finally, Tez stood, his movements deliberate. D. You made your choice. Just remember, you started this. Demeter's eyes didn't leave Tez as he and his crew walked out. The moment the door slammed shut, Hammett spoke. We should have dropped him right there. No, Demeter replied. This ain't the time. But trust me, it's coming. Targeting the syndicate's supply lines, the Trays wasted no time preparing for war. Demeter called a meeting at the barbershop, the crew's unofficial headquarters. Soldiers packed the small space, their faces a mix of excitement and nerves. Demeter stood at the center, his presence commanding the room. We're hitting their pockets first, he announced. They think they can take what's ours? Let's see how they like losing their bread. Hammett and Ty were tasked with planning the first strike. An ambush on a syndicate supply run rumored. The plan was simple, hit fast, take everything, and leave nothing behind. The night of the raid, Hammett led a small crew into the warehouse. The syndicate had guards posted, but they were sloppy, half asleep, and distracted. Hammett took out the first guard with a single, silent punch, the man crumpling to the ground like a sack of bricks. Move, Hammett whispered, signaling Ty and Idireb to fan out. Within minutes, the crew had neutralized the guards and secured the stash. The haul was better than expected, crates of guns, duffel bags full of cash, and a small mountain of product. As they loaded the van, Idireb couldn't help but grin. They're gonna feel this one, he said. Hammett nodded, his expression grim. And we ain't done yet. Jalen's funeral. Jalen, one of their most loyal soldiers. The funeral was held at a small church on the outskirts of the south side. The mood was somber, the pews filled with faces hardened by loss. Demeter stood at the front, delivering a eulogy that was equal parts tribute and call to action. Jalen wasn't just one of us, he was family. And we don't forget family. The people who did this? They think they're untouchable. They think they're safe. But they're wrong. Hammett, sitting near the back, felt the weight of Jalen's death more than he let on. The young man had looked up to him, had trusted him to keep him safe. And now he was gone. As the service ended, Hammett stayed behind, lingering by Jalen's casket. Ty approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. We'll make it right, Ham. We better, Hammett replied. Chapter 12, Blood, Bonds, and Broken Streets Part 1, The war intensifies. The streets of 63rd were quieter than usual, but the silence wasn't coming. Since the failed alliance with the Southside Syndicate, the Trays had been under siege. Tez Holloway, the syndicate's leader, had struck with precision, leaving his violent signature on Tray-controlled businesses of Demeter's growing empire. The latest hit had been brutal. A Tray stash house on 64th was firebombed in the middle of the night, taking out not just product, 2 soldiers. The word syndicate was scrawled in blood-red graffiti on the alley wall, a declaration of war that couldn't be ignored. Strategizing the counterattack in the barbershop turned war room, Demeter sat at the head of the table, flanked by Hammett and Vic. The rest of the crew filled the room, the air heavy with tension. Ty leaned against the wall, arms crossed, while Idireb fidgeted with a blade, his energy radiating impatience. They're trying to bleed us, Demeter said, his voice calm but ice cold. Hitting our spots, taking out our people, forcing us to react. But they're leaving themselves open. Hammett nodded. We hit their supply line hard. They've been moving product through that warehouse on 66th. We shut that down, and they'll feel it. Ty, always calculating, added, we need intel first. We go in blind, we're asking for losses. Demeter glanced at Vic, who had a knack for gathering information. You're up. Find out everything, numbers, guards, schedules. I want to know what Tez ate for breakfast. Vic grinned. Consider it done. The warehouse ambushed 3 nights later, under the cover of darkness, Hammett led a small crew to the syndicate's warehouse. The intel had been solid, 3 guards outside, 2 more patrolling the interior, and enough product inside to cripple their operation for weeks. Hammett moved like a shadow, his Glock in hand. He signaled Ty and Idireb to flank the guards, their movements precise and silent. The first guard dropped with a swing. By the time the third guard realized something was wrong, it was too late. Hammett's fist connected with his jaw, sending him to the ground. Inside, the team moved quickly, taking out the remaining guards and securing the stash. The haul was impressive: boxes of cocaine, crates of guns, and bundles of cash stacked like a monument to the syndicate's arrogance. Idireb let out a low whistle. This is a damn gold mine. Burn it. The flames roared to life as the crew retreated, the fire consuming the syndicate's wealth and leaving a message that couldn't be ignored. Part 2. Hammett's inner conflict. Maya's departure. The night after the warehouse raid, Hammett returned home to find Maya sitting on the porch, a packed duffel bag at her feet. Her face was tired, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and resolve. I can't do this anymore, Ham, she said softly. Hammett's chest tightened. Maya, don't, she interrupted. I know you're trying to protect me, but this life? It's killing you, and it almost killed me. I can't stay here. Hammett sat beside her, his head in his hands. You know I'd give it all up for you, right? Then why don't you? She asked, her voice trembling. He didn't have an answer. Instead, he handed her an envelope stuffed with cash. This'll get you set up. You need anything, you call me. Maya hesitated, then hugged him tightly. Take care of yourself, Ham. For real. As she walked away, Hammett felt a piece of himself leave with her. A glimpse of another life. A few days later, Hammett visited Marcus at his auto shop. The sound of tools clinking and engines humming filled the air, a stark contrast to the chaos of the streets. You look like shit, Ham, Marcus said, wiping his hands on a rag. Feel like it too, Hammett admitted. Marcus leaned against the workbench. You ever think about getting out? Every damn day. Then do it. Streets don't love nobody, Ham. You know that better than anyone. Hammett nodded but said nothing. The idea of leaving felt like a distant dream, something he couldn't afford to want. Part 3. The syndicate declares war. Escalation. Tez, enraged by the warehouse raid, unleashed a wave of violence across trade territory. Businesses were torched, runners ambushed, and corners turned into battlegrounds. The Trays fought back, but the constant attacks were wearing them down. At a strategy meeting, Demeter addressed the crew. They're coming at us from all sides, trying to break us. But we don't break down 63rd, Ty, Idi, you're with me, we're taking the fight to them. Defending the block, Hammett turned 63rd into a fortress, organizing patrols and setting up lookouts. The streets buzzed with activity as Tray soldiers prepared for the inevitable. One night, a group of syndicate soldiers attempted to push onto 63rd. Hammett and his team intercepted them, the confrontation erupting into a violent clash. The syndicate retreated, leaving blood on the pavement and a clear message: the Trays weren't backing down. Part 4. Betrayal from within. The traitor. Unbeknownst to the Trays, Dre, a young recruit with ties to the syndicate, had been feeding information to Tez. His betrayal came to light after a failed syndicate raid, where the attackers seemed to know Tray movements too well. Hammett confronted Dre in an alley, his gun drawn. You been running your mouth? Dre stammered, his fear palpable. They had my mom, Hans. Hammett's finger hovered over the trigger, but he hesitated. Get out of here. And don't ever show your face again. Part 5. The final stand, the battle for 63rd. The final confrontation was inevitable. The syndicate launched an all-out assault on trade territory, the streets of 63rd transforming into a war zone. Bullets flew, fires raged, and bodies fell as the two crews clashed in a fight for dominance. Hammett and Ty fought side by side, their movements synchronized like a deadly dance. Idy Reb, wild and relentless, took out 3 syndicate soldiers before going down himself, his body riddled with bullets. Demeter versus Tez. In the heart of the chaos, Demeter and Tez faced off in an abandoned warehouse. The fight was brutal, both men pushing themselves to their limits. In the end, Demeter emerged victorious, standing over Tez's broken body. You should have stayed in your lane, Demeter said, pulling the trigger. Aftermath. The syndicate was finished, but the victory came at a heavy cost. He stood at the edge of 63rd, watching the sun rise. He knew he couldn't do it anymore. I'm done, he said quietly, as the streets he fought to protect faded into the distance. In the center of the room. Grizz was strong, his punches heavy, but Hammett was faster, his years as the Trey's enforcer giving him the edge. With a well-placed uppercut, Hammett sent Grizz crashing around. Tell your boys to back off, Hammett growled, standing over him. Or next time, you ain't walking out. Grizz wiped the blood from his mouth, his smirk returning. This ain't over. Strategic moves. After the brawl, Demeter knew the Fangs wouldn't stop until they were dealt with permanently. But he also knew a full-scale war would bring too much heat from the cops. Instead, he decided to cut Fangs off at the knees. Vic was tasked with gathering intel, using his network of... They had a plan: hit their supply lines, disrupt their... and force them out of the game. We don't just beat them, Demeter said during the planning session. We break them. The supply line raid the Trey struck at dawn, targeting a delivery truck loaded with guns and cash meant for the Fangs. Hammett led the operation, his crew moving with precision in his guards before disappearing with the cargo. By the time the Fangs realized what had happened, their entire operation was in disarray. The aftermath. The Iron Fangs, unable to recover from the loss of their supply line, began to fracture. Grizz tried to hold them together, but dissent spread like wildfire. Within weeks, the crew splintered, their territory swallowed up by the Trades and other opportunistic gangs. Demeter stood on the corner of 63rd, watching as the block returned to normal. Another one down, he said quietly. Hammett nodded beside him. And more to come. 1. Consolidating power post. Fangs. The fall of the Iron Fangs was both a victory and an opportunity. With the Fangs out of the picture, the Trays quickly moved to fill the void, claiming the abandoned territory on 61st and 62nd. Demeter. The takeover. Demeter, Hammett, and Ty stood on the corner of 62nd, surveying the block. The old Iron Fangs tags were still visible on the walls, but the streets felt different. The fear that once gripped the area had faded, replaced with cautious curiosity. Put them under our protection. Then we locked down the corners. Hammett nodded, his eyes scanning for potential threats. You think any of these small crews gonna try to step up? Let him try, Demeter replied. We'll handle it. Their first stop was a bodega owned by a Dominican family. The shopkeeper, wary but pragmatic, agreed to pay the protection fee after Hammett assured him the Trays would keep the block safe. We're not the Fangs, Hammett said. You pay us, and we make sure nobody messes with you. That's a promise. Rival crews testing boundaries, not everyone was eager to bow to the trays. Smaller crews, seeing the power vacuum left by the Fangs, began testing the tray's limits. One crew, the Brick Boys, tried to muscle in on a corner already tray control. The confrontation was quick and decisive. Hammett's presence alone was enough to send most of the Brick Boys running. The few who stayed behind learned the hard way that the trays didn't play. You step on our block again, Hammett growled, standing over one of the crew's leaders, and US grew. So did the challenges of managing their operations. The crew was stretched thin, with each member taking on new responsibilities. ID Reb's redemption. ID Reb, still recovering from his discipline, was determined to prove his loyalty. He started taking on smaller tasks, running collections, and handling low-level disputes with precision. His wild energy, once a liability, became an asset under Hammett's guidance. I ain't trying to mess up no more, ID told Hammett one night. I just want to show D I'm still down. Then keep doing, Hammett replied. Stay focused, and you'll be straight. Vic and Ty's logistics. Vic and Ty, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to manage the growing logistical demands of the operation. Vic handled the money, keeping meticulous records of who paid and who didn't. Ty coordinated the crew's movements, ensuring that every corner was covered and every shipment was secure. We're moving fast, Ty said during a late-night meeting with Demeter. Too fast. We need to slow down before we overextend. Demeter nodded. You're right. Let's consolidate what we got before we push any further. 3. Law enforcement tensions. The tray's success didn't go unnoticed by the authorities. Increased police patrols on 63rd made it harder to operate, and the new detective, Detective Harris, made it his personal mission to bring down the crew. Detective Harris's campaign. Harris was relentless, orchestrating raids on suspected stash houses and harassing traymen bordering on harassment, but they were effective. They on our ass heavy, Hammett said during a meeting at the barbershop. Harris ain't playing. Demeter frowned. We need to tighten up. Move the stash spots, keep our people low-key. A stash house was a blow to the trays, costing them thousands in cash and product. Demeter took it personally, vowing to find out who tipped off the cops. We got a rat, Demeter said, his voice low and dangerous. And we ain't stopping till we find him. 4. Community relationships. The tray's relationship with the community was complicated. Some residents appreciated the order they brought to the block, while others saw them as a plague. The community project. In an effort to improve their image, Demeter started a community project, funding the renovation of the local rec center. The move earned him some goodwill, but it also drew criticism from residents who saw it as a front for their illegal activities. This don't erase what y'all doing out here, one elder said during a meeting. You can't buy respect. Demeter nodded, his expression unreadable. Buy respect. We just trying to give back. The pushback. Not everyone was willing to accept the tray's help. A local preacher, Reverend Carter, openly condemned them, calling them a cancer on the community. His sermons drew attention, both from residents and the cops. You think he's a problem? Hammett asked Demeter after one particularly heated sermon. He's loud, Demeter replied. But he ain't no threat. Let him talk. 5. The cost of power. As the trays solidified their control, the cracks in their foundation began to show. The pressure of maintaining their empire weighed heavily on everyone, especially Demeter. Moral dilemmas. Crew faced tough decisions as they balanced their business with the community's needs. One night, a single mother approached Hammett, begging for a break on her protection fee. I'm just trying to feed my kids, he stated, then slipped her the money out of his own pocket. You good for now, he said. But don't let it happen again. Regrouping after the raid on 64th forced the Trays to regroup. Demeter called an emergency meeting, his frustration evident. We're slipping, he said. We need to tighten up. No more mistakes, no more leaks. We keep moving, but we move smart. The crew nodded, their resolve renewed. Despite the setbacks, the Trays were determined to hold ground. Chapter 8, Hunting Shadows. The Trays were on high alert. Detective Harris, with his relentless focus on taking down the crew, had disrupted their operations, forcing them to adapt or risk collapse. At the same time, the remnants of the Iron Fangs began regrouping, forming a new rival crew, the Steel Wolves, under a brutal and cunning leader named Cyrus Wolf James. These parallel threats forced Demeter and Hammett to confront enemies on all fronts while holding their empire together. 1. Detective Harris's escalating tactics. Detective Harris wasn't like the shaking people down for pocket money or turning a blind eye for a cut. Harris was a different breed, calculated, methodical, and with a personal vendetta against crews like the Trays. Surveillance and pressure. Harris started small, setting up surveillance on known Tray hangouts. He posted unmarked cars near the barbershop. The pressure was unrelenting, designed to make the Trays slip up. Every move we make, he's there, Hammett said. Keeping his crew in line with a combination of loyalty and brutal enforcement. He's like a snake, Ty said during a meeting. He strikes when you least expect it. And he don't care about the block, Vic added. He just wants to burn everything. The first strike, the Steel Wolves announced their presence with a brazen attack on one of the Trey's corners. A group of trade-affiliated runners was ambushed at night, their stash stolen and their leader left beaten in the street. When word reached, called an emergency. They want war, he said, his tone on our terms. Recon and retaliation. Hammett and Tide led a small team to gather intel on the Wolves. They staked out their hangouts, noting their numbers, routines, and weak points. The Wolves, thinking they had the upper hand, didn't bother hiding. Hammett and Idy Reb led the charge, hitting a wolf stash house in a lightning-fast raid. The Wolves
guide the financial freedom and correcting your status in the system. Midwest EDU focuses on educating individuals about practical steps like managing debt, building savings, and investing strategically. Key principles include financial jewels like trusts, bonds, and legal instruments to protect and grow assets, correcting your status in the system. This involves reclaiming your legal and financial identity within governmental and financial systems. Understanding your legal status, correct legal documents like birth certificates and social security to align with your preferred status. Attend workshops, read relevant materials, and network with like-minded individuals. Assess your current standing, understand your debt, credit status, and legal documentation. Take action. Start correcting your status through affidavits, trust formations, or AIP applications while building a financial foundation. Plan for long-term freedom, focus on investments, business ventures, and creating generational wealth. Midwest EDU's approach empowers individuals to break free from financial and legal constraints, ensuring they live a life aligned with their goals and values.